Today's topic will be what's called the yoga for the three stages of life, which is a concept from the Krishnamacharya tradition. And there's a book on that subject, a full-on book, which is called Three Stages, the Yoga for the Three Stages of Life by Sravatsa Ramaswamy, someone that I have studied with. It's a great teacher from this tradition of Krishnamacharya. So a lot of what I'm going to mention today is inspired by that book and by the teachings of Krishnamacharya, which you can then, if you're interested, you can follow and get a little bit more. The overall concept is that for each different stage of life, so basically be young age, let's say child, adolescent, and up to young adult, then full-on adult, and then what would be later age. Some people don't like to say like this, but like old age, the third stage. And for each of these times in life, or those periods in life, there are certain practices that are more suitable, or they will bring more benefit, or also they will be understood better when done at those stages. The idea is like if you try when you're very young, if you try to rush it and jump to the practice of the third stage, you might not reap full on the benefits of it. Now from the first stage, which would be the youngster or the very young stage of life, traditionally speaking in India they'll say something from when you're born up to about 25 years of age. For that stage of life, the suggestions are normally to apply more focus into the physical practice. So since we're talking about yoga here, we'll be pretty much giving a lot of attention to asana, to posture, to movement, developing the strength of the body, developing the flexibility of the breath, developing the flexibility of the limbs, of the joints. So a lot of focus on the proper physical aspects of it, which is interesting because in any case, in the modern scenario, that's pretty much the focus of yoga overall. Even if an older person comes to yoga, normally they will also end up being guided and focusing on the physical aspect anyway. But traditionally speaking, the idea is that the young time until about 25 is really the ideal period for emphasizing that aspect, the physical aspect of the practice. There are a few reasons to justify this idea. One is, of course, the body in general will be more capable. It's fairly reasonable to consider that when the person is young, in general, it's easier to develop the body, it's easier to recover the body, it's easier to learn new things, coordination. The body is more capable of learning. And even the mind, in certain cases, is more open to learning as well. So you have this facility of young age to learn and to develop, to grow. Also, at that stage of life, in general, it's a time that you have less responsibilities, or at least responsibilities that are very much a responsibility. You cannot postpone, you cannot make a mistake on it. So that gives you that sense of freedom to explore. And one aspect also to consider is that due to lack of maturity, certain aspects of the mental world or the psychological realm might not be so much of interest for the person yet. The development of virtues, for example, or certain relational aspects which will come later through living and through experience at that point might not make so much sense for that individual. So the body can take a lot of attention and a lot of focus. You can say in a simplistic way, it's kind of a selfish state or stage of life in which you're trying to develop, you're trying to grow. And then the body becomes the focus. It's a less subtle stage of practice, but an important one. The second stage or period is the full-on adult life. Traditionally speaking, will be between 25 until about 60 years of age, when you're considered a proper adult. Here, the concept is to move the practice from that emphasizing of the physical development towards slightly more subtle things, which Krishnamacharya would say mostly be breath-related practices, pranayama, and meditation. There are a few justifications for that. One is, first is, when you're an adult, most probably going to start to encounter more psychological pressures. You're going to have more stress, basically. There'll be more responsibility, there'll be tasks related to relationship, tasks related to dealing with material world. So there will be a lot of psychological stress. I think anyone at that stage of life will understand what I'm mentioning. And the physical development helps. It's obvious, like every adult should exercise, every adult should do sports, every adult should continue to develop their body. But you see, for example, nowadays we have so much sports going on, it's fairly spread all around cultures that people should exercise for well-being, for health, and etc. But funny enough, at the same time, we have an explosion of mental conditions such as depression and suicide and what we term as mental-related diseases. So we have a psychological crisis at the same time that you have a exercise physiological emphasis. So to me, that shows that just exercising is not necessarily enough to allow people to cope with the stresses of modern living. And maybe that was the point of Krishnamacharya when he said that as you get into the adult stage, just body practices are not enough. You need something that addresses the mind more directly. On the perspective of yoga, this progression towards more psychological or more mental or more subtle based practices is via the breath. The breath is a bridge between body centered towards mental, emotional, psychological centered practice. So the suggestion here is that you should move into, let's say, if you have a 1 hour practice, when you are young, you do 50 minutes of physical exercise, physical practice, asana and so on, vinyasa, and then you do 10 minutes of breathing and meditation. At this point of life, when you're an adult, then you can maybe split that's 30 minutes for the physical practice and 30 minutes for breathing, pranayama practices plus meditation. So you have to divide your time better to accommodate these deeper experiences. It's important that you have crossed properly the first stage, because a lot of the abilities you gain when you're young and you have developed the body, they will be kept. It's fairly known in experience that if you go to the gym, let's say, and you do the gym for 5 years, later it's much easier to maintain whatever you have gained, what people call muscle memory. So the body, once it's developed enough over a certain amount of time, it keeps that ability. Let's say you used to play basketball when you're young and then you stop it at a later point in life. When you're older, you go just try and play it again. You realize, although you're not as good as if you have kept practicing, you can still do some of it. So the body retains that some of those capacities. The point is, if you have done when you're young, if you have focused on the body, now you don't have to worry so much of it. You just have to enter now a process of maintenance. You just keep it going without forcing too much. It won't be necessary anymore to push. I see a lot of practitioners, yoga practitioners, doing a mistake here at this stage of life because they keep on emphasizing the physical. Although they already have a lot of capacity, they continue to push and push and push on the physical side. They end up getting injuries, or they also end up getting bored. They already can do a lot, and you start to get into the stage that you just get 1% better, 1% better with so much effort. So it might not be an ideal strategy. You kind of delay your progress or stall your progress in the yoga path. If you already have done a lot of the physical practices, now it's time for enter maintenance and to focus and develop the more subtle principles of breath and meditation. The third stage is the, let's say, old age or the senior age. Classically speaking, would be said after 60. Normally, once you cross 6 years of age, there are signs on the body which shows the aging process more clearly. For example, the loss of color of the hair, loss of muscle mass, this wrinkling of the skin. There are certain signs that comes after 60 years of age, which is probably why, for example, many countries will say that the retirement age is around 60, 65, because the body shows it. On this structure of stages of life and yoga practice, this is the time now to basically develop two techniques, let's say, and one quality. The two techniques is, first is to focus a lot on philosophy and to focus on meditation. So philosophy is the learning, is to retain the quality of the mind, to reflect, to consider, to understand, so that knowledge base. And meditation is to emphasize the experience of deeper, subtle realms of existence, which are actually independent of, to a certain degree, independent of the body. The movement at this time in life is towards the psychic realm, the psychic environment, the mental environment. You could even say that the body is showing that. The body now is fading, but qualities of the mind can be retained. For example, even virtues, abilities, let's say, of living. You can be very old and still very humble, or very old and still very patient, and very humble and very kind. You can be very old and very gentle. You can be very old and very honest. And while physical abilities, of course, you cannot sustain. Everyone, even an athlete, will get to that point and won't be able to do a lot of what they used to be capable of. So as mentioned, there will be techniques and there's a quality to be developed. The quality to be developed at the point is what's termed in Yoga Vairagya, or detachment, to let go. That's the challenge and the beauty of this older stage, which is to train, to develop the capacity to let go, even to let go of the body itself. Eventually death will come and the ultimate letting go has to be accomplished. But before that moment, you can train it. And a lot of meditation and a lot of these ancient philosophies are focused on detachment. If you think of meditation is to detach from certain constraints of individuality and selfishness towards more broader, more freer experiences of mind. And this, the beauty of this stage is that at this point, society, the body, everything is allowing you to let go. The demands are less. You can really, really do it. And that's the point I mentioned in the beginning. If you try as a young person to be too detached, you might encounter a lot of barriers and difficulties. The society is asking you certain things, the body will be asking other things, people will be, relationships will be asking certain things for you to actually be engaged with. While at older stage, you have that space and the freedom and tradition in societies that was given to older people. Now you're free. Now you can really relax. You can really let go. Yes, you should keep doing physical practices to maintain quality of living, but that doesn't have to be the focus anymore. There are other things you can explore and discover about existence. And this is the stage for it, for meditation, for philosophy. If you manage to cover all these three stages, you have covered then all of the realms or the steps into a full-on yoga existence.